Hello and welcome everybody, and welcome to this exciting breakout deep dive session with Ovidrive. We have with us today Laura Friebe, who is Enterprise Solutions Manager at Ovidrive. And we're going to have a small presentation of her for around 20 minutes about the use of technology to manage your global and fleet and mobility data. Hi Laura, great to have you on board.
Thank you, Sven, and welcome everybody. It's great to be here with all of you this afternoon. Well, this afternoon my time, but today. And as Sven mentioned, we are on a tight schedule, and I want to ensure that you get the most out of today's topic. So let's jump straight into it.
Yeah, just one more thing, if I may, Laura, before we kick off to the audience. Obviously, if you have any questions for Laura, please use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. Just put your questions in there, and then we will try to answer them if we have time left at the Q&A at the end of the breakout. So, Laura, the floor is yours now. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Sven. So guys, I'm here to chat around the complexity of data and what we're all facing, or what US fleet owners are facing today from various different sources. And as you know, data is vital to all of your decision making. The challenge that you face, however, is how you are consolidating the data, where you're storing it, and how accessible it is for you in order for you to make informed decisions. What makes it complex for you is that you're having to deal with information both internally and externally, and you're receiving the data in various different sources, formats, and in some instances, it could be inaccurate, it could be, it's not even relevant to what you're trying to achieve within your business, and it could also be inaccurate. You're also receiving information from various different vendors. I don't think in today's market you have a single vendor supplying you with information. You have different touch points, and it's also difficult for you to control budgets and ensure that you are on top of all of the information that you're receiving at any point in time. Coupled with that, you then have to feed information to various stakeholders within your business and ensure that it is compliant and meeting their needs. So not only from an employee experience point of view, but also from an HR and compliance point of view. So let's add another level of complexity as a fleet owner, and that's digitization. So everybody has got a system and everybody is able to provide you with either BI reporting or various information that you need to have access to. But that means you're accessing various systems to get information, and within your own organization, you're having to input information to provide valuable insights to stakeholders within your organization so that they can make decisions. In order to future-proof your fleet, you're also needing to look at your data and analyze whether you want to move to electrification, what the technology changes are going to mean for your fleet, and then you're looking at connectivity and also vehicles that are not connected. So fleet owners are not only looking at data pertaining to their fleet and budgets and costs, but you're also having to look at sustainability models, and you're having to align with corporate social responsibility targets and hurdle rates. You're having to look at safety, equipment, driver behavior, emission standards. So it's not just a matter of looking at cost control anymore, or vehicle selection, or total cost of ownership. It's also looking at being social responsible citizens. And then compliance. So let's just add that into the mix. And you're having to look at regulations, you're having to align your policy, you're having to ensure that your drivers are compliant and that they have valid driver's licenses, and that your insurance, etc., is also not impacted. So if I had to tie this all together, you as a fleet manager are having to try and manage by exception, consolidate all of your information effectively, not analyze data where there's potentially errors or pick up on the errors, manage governance, implement policy, and also look at various strategies to ensure that you are moving forward with regards to your fleet and that you are fair and consistent with policy and how it's adopted regionally and globally. So what are some of the strategies that you are having to focus on with the data that you have? One of the most topical subjects on the forefront of every agenda at the moment is sustainability, and having to reach very steep targets either by 2025, 2030, or in some instances 2050, depending on your business. If you don't know what you're looking for, or if the data that you're reviewing is inaccurate, it's going to be very difficult for you to meet those hurdle rates. It's also going to be very difficult for you to implement CO2 emission strategies, and it's also going to be difficult for you to look at possibly other mobility initiatives. One of those initiatives is electrification. How do you try and implement an electrification model within your fleet if you don't know what your drivers are doing with the vehicles, you don't know their utilization rates, you don't know if the information you're receiving is accurate, and you also don't know what the infrastructure looks like. All of that information is vital, but if you don't have it at your fingertips and it's not accurate and it's not a single source of truth, it is going to be very difficult for you to make a move forward in terms of adapting your fleet to electrification. Another element pertaining to global data is cost management. Cost management's never going to go away. I think in 2020, there would have been substantial cost savings across fleets because people were not using their vehicles. Fuel usage was a lot less. People were working from home. You would have heard through various discussions this morning about people not actually needing their vehicles at all, maybe needing a vehicle once or twice. So all of that would generate savings. But what is the stick in the sand, and what are you measuring it against? And have you got information at your fingertips to know what to focus on coming out of the pandemic, or when you are looking as an organization at what the new norm could potentially be? And what percentage saving are you looking at? In the past, it was between 5 to 7%. Is it still going to be that high, or is it going to be potentially different? And how do you align your business to make sure that you can meet those hurdle rates? So moving forward, and why you've joined our discussion and breakout room today, is how do you implement a strategy? First and foremost is you've got to look at what you're ultimately wanting to achieve. And then you need to have a look at where the gaps are in your data. What would the benefits be of centralizing your data? And ultimately, what would it mean for you, and what would it mean for your organization and the strategies that you are trying to implement? From my point of view, consolidated data from a global standpoint is where you need to start. And you need to look at implementing global data not only from the various regions, but also from your various suppliers, and having it in one central platform that you can use as a single source of truth. It would allow you to align budgets at vendors. You would be able to look at various suppliers. And what it would also mean for you is the standardization of reporting internally and really being able to get to grips with what you're looking at. From there, you would be able to look at your business from each business is unique in its requirements and what it's trying to achieve. And your work streams would be unique as well. But the biggest thing when implementing global data is, what is the impact going to be to the operations? What is the impact going to be to key stakeholders? If you have a single source of truth and everything in one global platform, you'd be able to unpack those various work streams into bite-sized chunks, and you'd be able to implement them without having to impact the business drastically, and also use resources that are under immense pressure trying to focus on other core elements within your organization. So if you think back to the beginning of my discussion in terms of all of the information and the complexity of what you're having to deal with, this is what a consolidated view would look like and what it would mean for you ultimately. It would ensure that you have all of your vendors and suppliers mapped out in a system that you could have access to the information, and you know that all relevant data in terms of your fleet life cost is in one place. You could have asset management, both connected, unconnected, owned, leased, from various different sources coming into the system, and it would give you valuable information. Let's not forget about the drivers. I mean, drivers ultimately determine the information going back to the suppliers, coming back to you. Here, you would be able to gather information immediately from the driver into the system, and it would be able to flag alerts. So for me, a consolidated data source within a tech-savvy system would be able to drive a lot of your decision-making and also provide you with a single source of truth, and also time and free up resources to focus on exceptions rather than trying to consolidate and analyze the data yourself. When partnering with somebody that has the relevant system that meets your needs, they also need to provide you with the services that are going to align with your business. So that we're talking about data input, data output, but also the management of the data and the frequency in which you need to access the data. From there, they also need to assist your drivers with various driver services, but it has to be aligned to your business. It cannot be, I think a lot of the guys have said today, a one-size-fits-all approach. Your business is unique, and you also can't be consolidating all of your data to have a look at the information that you've already been receiving from various sources. It needs to be relevant, it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to generate an outcome for you and your business, and generate towards targets that you are ultimately wanting to achieve. Once you have all of that in place, you will definitely have the time and the capacity to align with a consulting partner that could then look and assist you with execution on strategy, such as sustainability models, mobility initiatives, electrification, governance and compliance within your fleet, and then also policy. So assist you in rewriting potentially what your policy would look like, ensuring that it's fair and that everything is moving in the direction and future-proof. So what I'm trying to say here is you're getting your house in order, you're normalizing what feels like chaos, and you're able to make informed decisions on accurate information that's near real time. So what would this mean for you? With technology at the forefront and centralized data, you'd be able to look at global sourcing. You'd be able to take action on different processes. You'd effectively be able to focus on safety, CO2 reductions, because you have a single source of truth and an accurate data source in which to measure from. You will definitely generate cost savings. You'd be able to measure expenses coming in against budgets, against contracts, against plan. You'd be able to look at various KPI reports and share different KPI reports within the organization and shareholders that's relevant to them. IFRS reporting, very relevant in today's market, and with centralized data sources, you'd be able to have accurate IFRS reporting. Payroll would be normalized, and your driver communication would be more effective. What that also means for you is that you can continuously feed back into policy. You can look at governance. You can look at key metrics. You can align policy. As you would have heard, the market is changing. It's continuously evolving. But if your data is not at the forefront and accurate, you're not going to be able to innovate and be forward-thinking and align with what's required. So key takeouts for me, and I have probably rushed through this slide deck too quickly, but for me, you need to have a single source of truth for your fleet. You cannot make decisions on inaccurate information or outdated information. And once you have that, you'd be able to align with subject matter experts on effective execution that means minimal disruption to your business. Thank you. So I think, Sven, that we could possibly move over to any questions.
Correct. Thank you very much, Laura. Very interesting presentation. Indeed, I think that's also one of the key themes throughout the entire Global Fleet Conference. It's data, it's everything that has to do with data, and it starts with data, obviously. I do have a couple of questions, and there was also a question in the chat box. So to the audience, again, if you have any questions, just put them in there, and we will try to answer them, even though we are already relatively short on time. But I think there was one question from Michael Ferreira, specifically around data integrity. How do you ensure the integrity of the data that you're collecting, in definitely when we're talking about international data collection, so across different countries? How do you ensure that and normalize the metrics to capture that data?
So great question, and definitely valid. So how you validate it is at the onset and setup of your system provider or your technology provider, Mike. It goes according to mapping the contracts and ensuring that the effective budgets are aligned. And then the system would ultimately flag if there are any discrepancies with information coming into the system. So, for example, a report has potentially changed and there's now new information that's not accurate. A system would actually flag that to you and then ask you to please verify that the information is correct. Why are we receiving this information and what is it aligned to? So that immediately would eliminate inaccurate information being fed into the system and allow you to action it quite or relatively quickly.
Okay, all right. That makes sense. And another question. So we are, as mentioned, at the Global Fleet Conference. So we have a lot of global fleet managers here. And as you can imagine, that collecting the data across all different regions around the world is not always the simplest of tasks. How do you suggest that, let's say, global fleet managers, global fleet owners approach that global data consolidation on a global level? What do you suggest in as a first step, or how to approach that?
So the first step is first understanding your business, understanding your unique structure and what the requirements are, and then also understanding who your vendors are. So a global supplier would work effectively with most suppliers, lease cos, or have means of integrating with various suppliers. So first and foremost is the design stage. So unpacking, understanding, asking the tough questions, asking what's needed, and then allowing giving access to that supplier to those vendors. It's then up to the supplier to ensure that they're getting the necessary information for them to upload into the system to make the information valid and relevant. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay,
there was one more question coming in, which I also had on my list. The information that you're capturing, is that coming from direct APIs from the suppliers? Is that coming from telematics? Is that coming from the invoices of suppliers? Where do you capture the data, or is that a little bit of everything?
So to answer your question, Sven, it's a little bit of everything. So it really does. So invoices are coming directly from the suppliers and it's mapped out in the system. You could be receiving information from telematics, so connected vehicles, unconnected vehicles, and then you can also be receiving information directly via a mobile app, potentially directly into the system. All depends on how the setup is done and what is required in terms of where we get all the data streams from.
And then I presume you're not limited only to vehicles. You could also look at perhaps other solutions or mobility solutions. Am I correct?
100%. You can look at different solutions.
Great. Okay, cool. Then I think we're a little bit over time, but that's fine. It was a very interesting session. Thank you very much, Laura Friebe from Ovidrive. So thank you, and thank you for still being with us because you're a long way, and it's probably a lot later at your end than it is on mine.
Thank you, Sven.
Thanks again for this interesting session. Thanks to the audience for being here. We now have a short networking break, and we will be back at 20 to 4 for a executive panel discussion with, I think, the world's largest leasing companies on main stage. So please do join at 20 to 4 and enjoy the networking now for the rest of the time. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.